Sanjeev, today I want to talk to you about Oracle. And Oracle's in an interesting position. They seem to have missed out to a large degree on the cloud platform. According to some analysts, including myself, I tend to agree that Oracle was caught flat-footed when we looked at things like the rise of cloud infrastructure as a service, like what Amazon is doing, what Google and what Microsoft is doing with Azure. But Juergen Lindner of Oracle, the senior vice president of ERP, I think, has said that they wanted to have a leapfrog strategy, and I don't know what that means. We look at the big providers like Oracle and SAP, for example, as the dominant ERP providers. There are other ones. Microsoft has ERP platforms. There are a lot of other ones that are out there that are more suitable for smaller and mid-sized companies. But they say that they're doubling down on this ERP investment, and they think that they can use that existing legacy infrastructure to leapfrog RPA. Now, we had another conversation. We talked about how RPA is in some respects a middleware of the 21st century. Is Oracle, I'm still kind of skeptical of what Oracle's saying, but what do you think? Do you think that they have a chance of doing this, or do you think that it's kind of a marketing speak to make an excuse for being caught off the guard?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things in there, right? So the one, all the business applications companies has to incorporate automation into their technology, their product suite. And in some cases, they're going to have to rewrite the architecture of some of these ERPs that are very complex and very old, and in some cases very, very rigid. So it has to be redone. And some of the new products that are coming out is actually way more innovative and way more faster running in terms of the new way of thinking, new way of delivering the products than Oracle has been in the past. Now, the question, bigger question from a business perspective, when you need to build those capabilities, when you need to incorporate those capabilities into the next set of products, do you build it in-house from scratch, or will you buy it? Right? So some of these, like SAP, Microsoft, are buying from outside those capabilities. Now, the other part of that question, if you decided you're going to buy, what is your history has been to incorporate those technologies and those capabilities into the existing legacy application and legacy culture, right? So Oracle taking a path, and it remains to be seen, is two different paths, but ultimate goal is to incorporate a lot more of those technologies in there. I think in the past, Oracle was not very acquisition friendly until Charles Phillips came, and since then they've been doing a lot of these acquisitions. Some has been successful, some has not been that successful. Same story with SAP and Microsoft. Microsoft probably has done a lot more acquisition and been very successful.
But no, you're right. I'm sorry. No, I was going to say Microsoft purchased Softomotive. I remember writing about that recently. SAP purchased Contextor, which is really kind of underlying exactly what you're saying.
Right. So it remains to be seen, but I think the strategic thinking perspective, the goal is the same, is the approach they both are taking different. I think it's probably be going too harder to build some of these capabilities quickly, fast enough within the company and re-architecture your application to incorporate and start releasing. Oracle, when they moved from on-premise to the cloud on their ERP, even today, some of the capability in the cloud, Fusion Cloud, is lack compared to the on-premise. So there's a big, massive problem to solve at different level and different scale and speed.
Right. Now the Oracle says that their strategy is going to be to take machine learning and allow that to mimic human decision making. But okay, that's kind of saying I'm going to take butter and come up with this innovative thing and put it on toast. Well, it sounds like what they're saying is I'm going to take machine learning and do what machine learning is for. I don't really see, and this is why I'm a little bit skeptical of what they're saying. And so I wonder then, now Oracle switched gears, and maybe now that they're going to be more acquisitive, like you said, there have been some personnel changes in leadership. But is it too late for them? Are they going to give up on RPA? If you ask them, they're never going to say that they've given up on the cloud. But they have, IBM says, oh, we have an infrastructure for service too. They're not the player that Azure or AWS is. Okay, Oracle can say that they're not giving up on it, but maybe they can catch up. But it looks like they've been beaten by AWS, and they would probably, bundle me in a bag and drop me in the ocean if they could get hold of me for saying that. But it does seem like the case. Or am I missing something? Maybe they have some secret sauce in their strategy, and they can either catch up or they can leapfrog. Is my skepticism based on ignorance? Do they have a secret plan? There are plenty of smart people there smarter than me. But I wonder if they can do it, how can they do it?
Yeah, it's a massive problem for them to solve in a multi-front at the same time, re-architecting the application completely for the new way of doing things, new unrigid data model and capabilities within the business application. At the same time, adding the automation within the application and the AI. Now, the challenge with the AI, people who are deep in AI knows currently AI is very narrow in terms of the scope that it brings to one specific problem. So the data model and the AI algorithm model that you build for autonomous driving doesn't work for stock trading. Mm-hmm. Or it doesn't work for looking at new star in a sky, right? So it's a very narrow, specific applications. Somewhat the Google OpenAI is trying to solve some of that problem based on their acquisitions and the game side they already did, right? You could train the model and let it play itself against various different games, and it started to become much better in playing any kind of game. But that's still not yet wholly useful for the business decision making, because there's a whole host of the other things that goes on into the business decision making than just a specific game that you can play within the rule set that is being defined. So that's a biggest issue in AI at this point in the machine learning. So now Oracle has to think about where they're going to spend the money on which side of those algorithms and which side of the data model to transform first, and then build on top of it. Which industry, which customer problem they're going to solve first, where they can get the acceleration, and then continuously build from that, and how long that will take before everything else changes underneath.
So Oracle has traditionally been, like IBM, often known. Well, IBM has kind of morphed throughout the years into different things, but a company focused on the large enterprise. I was talking to Barak Elaim, the CEO of NICE Systems, the big analytics and customer experience company. And he was very honest and frank with me a few years ago. He said, look, we are focused on the large enterprise. We're not a company with the SMB division. Now, they've actually changed with some acquisitions more recently, and now they actually do have some offerings that make sense in the SMB space. But Oracle, aside from specialized applications, because you might be a small bank and still run your systems on Oracle, but Oracle's focus has been on that large. There's ERP, and then there's accounting systems, and Oracle's focused on that large space. But I wonder, when I look at their competitors, and Google's another example, you mentioned Google, and they're able to scale, and they say, look, we can take you from a startup and you can build your platforms around us, and then when you become a unicorn, our platforms grow with you. I think Amazon's been very effective in that. And so you have these companies like Uber and Lyft that started out as these little startups, but now they're giant companies. Netflix runs on is a frenemy situation because they run on AWS, but they're also competitors with Amazon for putting out streaming video, which I think is amazing. But still, it's interesting. What does Oracle do to defend their moat? I see all these other vendors shoveling dirt in their moat because they can storm the castle. So if I'm Oracle, I come to you and I want to ask you a strategy question. That's to say, how do I prevent customer defections? What are the 2 or 3 things that I can do to protect my existing enterprise base and still have a compelling value proposition as I go and try to win new clients? And it's a weird thing now, because before you'd see a big company form a big subsidiary, and then maybe later spin it off. Okay, and that's how a new company is born. But now, no, we see these four guys start a company, and then next thing you know, it's got, WeWork or something like that. It's got $1 zillion in valuation. So and Oracle isn't set up to really go after these companies that are, like TechCrunch, Disruptor, these kind of hackathon types of things. Oracle, that's not their culture. So how do they? What do they need to do from a corporate strategy standpoint to not just defend their clients, but simply remain relevant, right?
Yeah, and it's a big challenge has been for the core large ERP business application companies. SAP was 10 years ago, we're in the same fight, right? Whether we start SMB business or should it stay in the core, and how does the SMB and the cloud and everything else play there? Oracle is a very, very strong company. I was there for a long time, really enjoyed my time with the firm. And, if you think about from a couple of these angles, the NetSuite was actually started by Larry, right? So that's his investments, and it started from there way far early on than people were talking about SaaS-based ERPs, right? The 97, 98 time frame. Being very successful is back into the Oracle. Oracle had tried many times in the SMB market. The issue that you run into in any of this business side is, you got the existing SMB market, which won't provide you a huge amount of revenue and profitability, but it still requires a decent amount of resources to support them. So it's a totally different model to work and support and acquire those customers. B, that fascinating one is these new startups. Understanding where they are, how big their potentials are, and changing your licensing model and applications that nimble enough to support those early startup, but constantly provide those new capabilities and much more robust platform as the startup companies start to grow and at different scales, right? And so that requires the whole entire, like we talked about before, re-architecting the applications in a way. Maybe you can leverage the NetSuites and build from there and make the NetSuites much more robust and allow different companies to scale through on them. Or maybe you re-architect the whole entire thing and create a new application, new product that's allow early on startup companies into their foray of the becoming bigger, large behemoth. But keep in mind that segment is very small. So the question is always comes down to how big is that market, how much revenue is going to provide, how much profitability is going to provide. Can you focus on that part on them, or you focus on other areas that you can provide to them? Now, the companies like HubSpot have done really, really well on certain side of the CRM on the mid-market. They're $1 billion plus now. And a totally different way of selling, totally different way of delivering products. Can you also build into this? Now, other part in the sales transformation in this, as you become more platform company, do you really need the same type of field sales to sell that? Or have the customer buy directly on the platform, and once they buy on one side of the product, let the platform start to help them understand what other feature functionality or the products or modules that they can use or their competitors are using that they're not leveraging on, and start turning it on and helping them to leverage that and have the revenue stream flow from there. So it's also requires that part of the change. So it's a massive change and massive problem for them to solve, but they have to solve.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially as they now find themselves competing with companies that have a vastly different sales model. If you look at things like Amazon Aurora or even their NoSQL database offerings and their enterprise offerings. Yes, of course, once you're at a certain size and you get dedicated account support and things like that, but it's not that traditional outside sales force that I used to belong to myself, where we grab our briefcase and our laptop and we're out there meeting with you and taking you to lunch, and while you're eating broccoli, we're telling you about the nice why you ought to buy from me because I'm such a nice guy and I'll be there for you, blah blah blah. Amazon doesn't work like that. Google doesn't work that. Microsoft is still kind of a hybrid because they've got an enterprise legacy infrastructure. When I say infrastructure, I mean sales infrastructure. But then they also seem to be doing a fairly good job of adapting. And Oracle may say that we don't want to play in that space. We're going to cede that space, and I think that there are some dangers there, but I think that there are some efficiencies there as well. And if that's the case, then maybe be true to that. Be true to who you are. I think is important because you can't be everything to everybody, right?
That's correct. And it also requires the one example they gave about the carve out. So the carve out are a pretty fascinating value creation for private equity. And they buy these days a lot of carve out businesses from a big behemoth companies, and they're now standalone, couple $100 million company, no longer part of the $150 billion business. And so they require a lot more nimble product and software. But granted, the infusion of the capital is being reason for that is there is a potential for that company to become a $2 billion business and be very successful. So tapping into that market, probably one area that actually straddle between the lower end of the middle market and the big giant corporate. And that could be a pretty lucrative business area, business market, but it requires a totally different selling. I think they've been very successful with the NetSuite. It's remaining to be seen with the other products beyond the NetSuite that serves that particular market segment.
It's interesting. A lot of what you've been talking about reminds me of the subject matter in the Innovators Dilemma, right? I mean, there you can have good ideas, but it may a good friend of mine is with Intel Capital, and there are things they'll say, that's a great idea. And I used to work in capital markets, and then being down here in Colombia, which is interesting because I have clients who who seek investment in foreign markets, and the problem that investors have, let alone people inside the company when they look at products, is they can say that's a great idea, but it's too small. It's not economical. It's not economical for us to invest in that. Whether we're an outside investors, I have companies. I see a company. A friend of mine runs a fund, and you'll see an investment. They say we're looking for $50 million, and the fund says we don't make investments under $500 million, right? Or you look at I've got a client, one of the largest companies in Colombia, over 5,000 employees, but in the U.S. they're a small cap, okay. And so a lot of it, they say we're an industrial company, we're blah, 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 blah. All that, we've got great financials, we've got great men, all that's true. But they're just so small that it's like, we can't look at you. Or then inside of a company, you might have a great idea. Well, here, we'll go fund it, go do a startup or something like that. But we're, at Intel, we can't do that. Okay, not because it's a bad idea, not because we don't believe in you, but it doesn't fit our economics because of our scale and because of our size. And so I think that I've thought back to the Innovators Dilemma several times when listening to you in this conversation.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And there's one layer about in the Innovators Dilemma. I posted recently on LinkedIn my findings on disruptive innovation. So Innovators Dilemma is actually from Clayton Christensen, and he's the one who coined the term disruptive technology and then disruptive innovation later on. But on those days, the key to those disruptive innovation was a small product, maybe serving the lower end of the market with a little bit of a capability or less capability than the existing products at the lower price, and then slowly takes over and continuously improve and slowly takes over the giant behemoths. It's actually not working that way anymore. So most of the total disruption that came in the market is the product or service that come in completely over the top. Mm-hmm. So when iPod came, was not an Nvidia product. When iPhone came, was not an Nvidia product. When Nest came, was not an Nvidia product. When the Tesla came, was not an Nvidia product. When Amazon released the cloud services, was not an Nvidia product, right? And they came up with the Kindle, was not an Nvidia product. When iPad came, was not an Nvidia product. So you can see when Netflix came, was not an Nvidia product, right? You can look at it all around us, the companies and the product and services that totally disrupted the market, and in some cases the market outside their market, were the product and services that came with way more capabilities than people were even expecting at much higher premium, but the people willing to pay because it was a great value to them. So when you investing in building this, the other part, the companies that fail in creating these new small innovation within the firm is they want to come and start very small, sometimes very inferior product, and it's totally botched and doesn't truly take off, and all of a sudden the innovation stops right there. So there's that part also, not working in favor for some of these large companies to come up with a new idea, new innovation that will totally going to disrupt the market.
It's interesting because I wonder what you think, because like you said, things have shifted, and just like how Moore's law doesn't go on forever, the challenges in the innovators dilemma, like you said, are starting to change. And I was sitting here thinking about, you have a giant company like Amazon, and I have several production workloads that I run on Amazon. But I look at some offerings that they have, and it's kind of fun to look into. There are things I'll never use, but I have to think that the market is really small, and it seems like they're trying to break the rules, and maybe they are successful to a certain degree. But I look at things like they just came out with Amazon Bracket, which is it's not really quantum computing, but it's like preparing you for quantum computing, and you can get in there and do experiments that are, and I don't really understand how it works. I'm still trying to figure out how quantum computing works, right? but they have an offering. They have a satellite ground station offering, and I can just run S3 cloud storage. I back one of my laptops up to S3, or I run my email with Amazon, and I use it for relatively mundane things. But then they have these like I can press the button there and sign up for satellite ground station control. And I wonder, you're a giant company, but you're doing these super niche things and throwing them out there, and they're not spinning any of them off. You don't see Amazon spinning off anything, right? They'll build this and they'll keep it. And so now the same company that you buy your red lentils from is I think about this because I ordered some red lentils from Amazon, and I'm like, this is the same company I get my servers from. and so they seem to be completely counter to the
traditional thing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that also, the other part is when you scale the company, just one product or one service is no longer going to scale you. You're going to have to constantly add the new product, new services, and sometimes beyond where you started and what your core capabilities are. And that's what you look at successful companies, whether Google, Apple, Microsoft, right, Amazon, Netflix, they've gone beyond where they started from.
Mm-hmm.
And adding these new capabilities and services and products that totally expanded into the new territory, and in some cases destroyed the other industries that originally didn't thought, right? And that's truly what other part of this innovations, disruptive innovation, is changing the business model, changing the way you've been doing things before, changing where you thought your core is no longer a product or services as your core is much more bigger management capabilities and the scalabilities and how you run the businesses. Can you incorporate and build other businesses on top of that? And that management system is, and some of those core capabilities of the culture and other infrastructure services that they have, whether it's building or other scalable platforms that they have to leverage from. And it will constantly evolve, right? So you look at Nvidia. Nvidia is another example, going from GPU companies to totally different new market. Now they just going into the car infotainment business, totally AI-based car infotainment business, which has been for companies like Vestion, has not done a really good job on over a period of time to transform it fast enough. And now there's a big new competitor coming up, totally different market set, right? Nvidia has never been in the automobile industry.
Right. No, I think of them as graphics GPU, like you said, GPU processors.
So they've been leveraging all their other technologies and other capabilities together, GPU, the AI engine, right? And then there's great capabilities of developing digital software, transforming the car infotainment, and now they have the opportunity to actually truly become a platform for everything for the car, the customizations to the actual managing the performance of the car, managing the safety of the car, right? It could go into many different areas and could become truly a platform, everything around the car.
And to bring this all the way back full circle, as we've been talking about this, as Amazon now sells beans and servers when they started out with books and music, and Nvidia is now taking the place of AC Delco or Philco, the old car radio manufacturers. To bring this full circle, Oracle, and this blows I can't get my head around this. Oracle and TikTok. I mean, they're super brilliant maybe, and I'm just a mere earthling and I can't see it, but we talk about companies that get into different fields and different areas and things like that, and there's probably something there, and I don't understand much about how TikTok works. Maybe I'm an old fogey, I don't know. I can ask my 18-year-old daughter, but is that do you see that as a clear is that a case of Nvidia getting into car electronics, or is that kind of a flyer? I don't know. Maybe that's a brilliant move, but I'm trying to fit enterprise database with silly videos that my daughter sends me.
Yeah, so there's a one part of the linkage is around the cloud services for right. So and you could truly, if you really want to build a brand, you need to build a brand these days right from the early stages of the life cycle of a human, right? And how do you get them aligned to your product, your name, your services, get to know you way before they actually old enough to either use your product or services or work for your company, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a one area that it could be leveraged for that platform. However, the TikTok business model itself might have its own different competition coming from YouTube or other platform. You start to see the Facebook and others, you start to releasing some of those kind of technologies, right? And it's not that hard for others to move into that business. And we talk about every product, every business has a life cycle. How long that life cycle going to stay and how fast you capitalize on it and learn. Maybe potentially the great learning for them in this one is managing a cloud infrastructure at a scale, because TikTok has a huge amount of scale.
Mm-hmm.
So leverage that part, leverage that learning, and then go after other areas to provide that cloud services at a scale that Amazon can claim and others could claim that they could provide at a scale, right? Not just the infrastructure or other cloud services for a billion-dollar company, right? This is a totally different way of providing who your customers and how you scale it, how you manage it, and serve those customers. There are applications. There are some of these areas to move into the new market. It's remained to be seen how long that business will itself grow and sustain and transform, and where they need to transform that before others start to catch up and start to grow their own business model.
Right. Well, it's going to be something to see. We've got Oracle and where it stands with infrastructure as a service. We've got Oracle and where it stands with RPA. And maybe what we're going to see is when we look at a cat video, then we're going to see the ad for RPA Enterprise ERP. I don't know, but you've been generous with your time. I appreciate it. It's been really insightful and fascinating. I think we've covered in a good way a lot more than we even wanted to, but I think that's just a sign of really having an interesting conversation. Hopefully it will be for our viewers as well. So Sanjeev, thank you as always. I can't wait until the next time that we circle back and speak again.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, and love to talk again.
Okay, take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye.